Hello everybody, welcome back to the OM System channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is David. I'm one of your tech experts here in the UK, and I usually do Tech Thursday, which is today. And today's Tech Thursday is let's talk about live composites. But of course you already knew that because that's why you're here. You've seen it all going on and you've clicked on to see exactly what it's all about. And hopefully this 1 hour session will give you a better idea of how to use live composite and some of the other features that are similar to it in different styles of photography for yourself. So before we get into that, and I'm going to come into the comments and everyone said hello. It's all wonderful to see so many of you in here today. Make sure that you let me know if there's any problems with my audio and video. Just before I started here in Cambridgeshire in the UK, a storm appears to be blowing through and I can hear some thunder and there's heavy rain and wind. So hopefully the signal, which for urban Wi-Fi is terrible, won't die out and we'll be able to finish the session. But please tell me in the comments if there's anything wrong with the stream and if there's anything on my side that I can do, I will do my best to sort it out. Before we go into live composite, I want to show you a video by one of our amazing Scandinavian ambassadors, Hannu Huhtamo, who's a fantastic wildlife photographer and light painter. And if you don't know Hannu, then I definitely encourage you to go and have a look at his work. But I'm going to show you a quick video showing him who can use it in far better than I could ever wish to, creating something magical, and then the final image. So here is the video from Hannu. I mean, how fantastically amazing is that work from Hannu there? An absolute wonderful image and one of many that he has created with using live composite and the OMSYSTEM.Cameras as well. I hope you all liked that. We're not going to be able to do anything near so amazing tonight, but I will have some small demonstrations just to give you an idea of how things can differ within live composite. I usually do that with a little still life, a little product photography that can be used as a kind of light painting thing with live composite. As always, this is a Tech Thursday, so please keep your questions coming into the chat. They're really, really important to keep this session running. Even if you've got questions that you don't think are related to live composite, please feel free to put them in, because I might kind of segue away from live composite and talk about other things if I have the opportunity as well. Everyone's telling me that sound and video is wonderful, so thank you very much for that. Always makes me feel better when I know that you can hear me while I'm talking away here. So let's talk about live composite then. So what is it and what can we do with it? Ultimately, live composite is a night or dark space tool. And a lot of people will use it for things like star trails, lightning, light painting, car trails and fireworks and things like that. And anything really that you will need to capture some sort of moving light source whilst preserving the whatever ambient exposure you want in the rest of the frame. So for example, if we were to use something like bulb photography or even live time, which you have in the OMD and now OMSYSTEM.Cameras, then what happens is the camera is continuously exposing the image to the light that's available, and the whole scene will gradually and equally expose brighter and brighter. And that's really, really good for some really dark areas. You can use live time and live and bulb for things like deep space photography, where you want to take a series of set exposures and then stack them for greater detail. But if you want to shoot a star trail over a period of 6 hours and get that kind of motion of the stars as we spin through the cosmos, then you're going to want to preserve all the rest of the skies. Now, traditionally, you would take tons and tons and tons of individual images at something like sort of 10, 15 seconds long, depending on the focal length of the lens. And then you would take all of those images into your post-editing software, stack them together, and create wonderful star trails. But if you can do that in camera and in RAW, then why not do it at the time? And that's what Live Composite is all about, really. So it takes the images in RAW and it stacks them all together continuously. So we're not taking, say, 300 or 400 separate images. We're simply rescanning the scene every X amount of seconds. We can set those seconds in order to collect new light that wasn't present in the previous frame. So super, super cool. You'll see me doing this quite a lot. If you're new here, you'll wonder why I'm kind of doing this. And that's because I'm on my own and I've got to check these questions to see if anyone's got anything for me. And I also apologize for any reflection in my glasses. Normally I have my glasses like that to stop the reflection, but it's not a good look, I've been told. So we're going to keep them in a normal position and we'll just put up with this slight reflection. It is a little bit darker in here than I would normally have it, and that's because of the demonstration. So we'll see that in a little while anyway. So let's have a quick dip in. Loads of people saying hello. I love your hellos. So thank you very much and hello back. Let's see. The first one I can come up with that's not a you're all such beautiful people, just hellos everywhere. We've got somebody, I definitely saw one relating to, yeah, there's a fireworks one and a lightning one. And I want to kind of cover those both in one kind of jump, really, because there's a very crucial and important thing to remember when photographing lightning and fireworks, and that is if you're using Live Composite, when you set up your camera and compose the frame and set the exposure parameters, there is no lightning and there are no fireworks, and so the scene is much darker. And so you need to remember that when exposing, because the lightning and the fireworks are going to brighten up the sky. So whatever you're using as a compositional tool to set your exposure, whether that's ambient light on some landscape or some buildings, if there's fireworks and things, set that about a stop under. So underexposed by about a stop on whatever you're viewing ambiently, because when the lightning or the fireworks goes off, it's obviously going to brighten up the whole scene somewhat. So that's really, really, really key. And the thing with lightning and fireworks is that you kind of do want to focus to infinity to get that sharpness and detail. So if you are shooting lightning and you've got some mountain range, 100 miles in the distance, then you can focus on that. Or the same with fireworks, you can focus on buildings that will be close to where the fireworks will be released. So that's really important. About a stop underexposed for that kind of thing, because it suddenly brighten up. Now the difference with doing things like light painting and car trails, for example, you don't need to underexpose per se, because with the car trails, you may well be seeing them live anyway. So you can adjust your parameters to actually see what's going on and see how bright those lights are as the cars are traveling. And then with light painting, it's more about getting rid of all of the ambient light and being in control of everything from there, depending on what you're shooting. So today, when I do the demonstration, ideally, I'd want to get rid of every drop of light. There is still a little bit of light that's going to be on our demo today, just purely because I can't do the stream in absolute darkness because you wouldn't see anything. So there will be a small amount of light there, but when you're light painting, particularly with products, if you're doing it indoors or if you're doing it outdoors with a building that you're also going to light, you want to get rid of all that ambient light first, and I'll show you how in that demonstration. Let's have a quick look. Ed, good to see you, Ed. I was in a session with Ed this week with a lot of other people talking about our menus, which is fantastic. Ed is asking what your thoughts on using manual and magnify to focus on an object in the foreground versus using starry sky to focus on stars. Well, so those are two very different options and techniques and reasons for using them. So starry sky is about focusing on stars. There's little tiny pinpricks of light at absolute infinity. That's what starry sky is all about. Whereas if it's objects in the foreground, landscapes in the foreground, buildings in the foreground, starry sky won't work for those. It's not the intended use. It may work on very tiny window lights, but I highly doubt it's functional in that way. And so manual focus, yes, with magnify would be very useful, so that you can sort of tweak it as you turn the manual focus, and the magnify assistant comes on, which you can set in the menu. Then it will obviously zoom in and give you a better idea of your focus level. So Ed, yeah, I wouldn't use Starry Sky on anything other than the stars. Good question though. Ken's asking a great question here. Is there a live composite setting that I can recommend for taking the final big bursts of fireworks? So yeah, so I would roll into what I said about underexposing one stop versus the ambient frame that you're working with, because then that's going to really kind of brighten up when those fireworks go off. It's very difficult to recommend a specific recipe for live composite with fireworks, because everywhere that you're shooting will have a different level of ambient light that's being used, and it could be across very plain backgrounds, or it could be across a cityscape, and so it can be quite different in that sense. But live composite will allow you to see pretty much what your ambient shot is before any light comes into the scene, so you can use that as a basis. So get that a stop under for your fireworks. Really great question there. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll tell you what we'll do. My microphone might move around a bit, so the sound might sound a bit weird, because I'm going to go from here to over here where the camera is to do the demonstration. I'm just going to reach over and switch that on just there. I'm going to show you, well, let's talk about how to get to it first, because there are a couple of ways. Some of you will be using Olympus OMD cameras, and some of you will be using OMSYSTEM OM cameras. And there are two different ways to kind of get to live composite across those borders. And there is a bit of a crossover as well with some of the later OMD models. So in order to get to the live composite feature on your camera, ideally, you're going to look at the top dial on your camera. Now, if there is a B on that top dial, it's nice and simple. You're going to turn that top dial to the B mode, and that's bulb. And it'll usually go to bulb or the last function within bulb that you last used, which could be live time or live composite, and it'll say it on the screen. So I'm just going to pop my display up just here, and you can see there that I've got a B in the bottom left corner. And if I cycle my rear dial back to bulb, that's the general traditional bulb setting for what we're doing. And all of the functions, live composite, live time, and bulb, are in the B mode in that dial. Now, if you don't have a B mode on your dial, if your camera is pre-EM1 Mark II, sorry, pre-EM1 Mark III, you don't have that B mode, then you'll need to go into M. And there we go. So once you're in M, you're in manual mode, you're going to cycle your shutter speed as slow as it can go. And it's going to go all the way down to 60 seconds, a whole 60-second exposure. And then another click turn on that dial is going to pop it into bulb, just like that. And I've cheated a little bit because I've spun that back to B on my dial. But if you haven't got that B on your dial, then you can use manual, slow that shutter speed all the way down until it gets to 60 seconds. And then your final click will take it into bulb. And then one more click will take it into live composite, live time, and then another click into live composite, and there are no more clicks. It can't go any more than that. So let's take this back a little bit. Just to give you an example, an idea of what I'm using here. I've got an OM1 Mark II. If you've got an OM1 Mark I, there are no differences into what I'm going to tell you regarding the bulb, live time, or live composite. And in fact, that counts for pretty much any camera that you'll be using these features on. There is no real difference in how they work. The results may vary because obviously the OM1 series has a different chip to the other earlier cameras. So it's got that stacked sensor, which is better for long exposures and high ISOs. But in this instance, when we turn to use live time and live composite, we generally, mainly live composite, we won't be using a high ISO anyway. So that's one of the benefits of using live composite, is that we can use a really nice high quality, low level ISO, and we're taking multiple images and stacking those live on top of each other. So what we've got is bulb mode. Now, bulb mode is traditional. and it's where we would press and hold the shutter down, or a shutter release if you have a cable release or a wireless release, or any sort of release that you want to use, or even the app, the OM image share app can be used as a release wirelessly. And effectively you're holding that shutter down. And if we do that now, in fact, I'm just going to stop this down to F8 so that we take a bit of light out of there. I'm going to hold that button down. And then this is sort of the problem with bulb, in that we've got no view. We don't have a live view. We don't know what's going on over there. The only thing I can really tell is that I've got a timer running. And if I've done it before, maybe I know how long to leave that shutter open for. And if I haven't, it's kind of guesswork. Now I'm going to release that shutter now, take my finger off it, and it's going to stop that exposure. Now I have to fill this stream with 25 seconds of waffling, because what's happening now is that the camera is taking another 25-second shot, because that's what I took the first time, but as a dark frame with the shutter down, in order to remove any heat noise caused by the length of time the shutter was open. So it's going to lay that dark frame behind it for noise reduction. Now we are going to turn that off, and I'll show you how to turn that off. And it's actually probably recommended to turn off if you're doing a lot of post edit with your raw files, because you can do it all in post anyway. So let's have a quick look at the image that we just took. And if it pops up, I'm not sure we've got that image. Or maybe we have got that image and it's just super dark. So let me just deactivate my camera and reactivate that. There we go. Let's see if I can bring that back. And there we go. Bit of a gremlin in the works there. So what's happened here is that because I've done this demonstration so many times and used live composite so much, I've inadvertently taken a fairly well exposed image using bulb. And what I wanted to do was take a very overexposed or very underexposed image. But ultimately, the point of this is that you don't know what's going to happen because bulb has no live view. Now you can use a very similar feature to bulb, which is live time. You can turn on live bulb again as well. So this is something else that I'll show you in the menu system. There we go. So my camera is definitely having a few gremlins today. So bear with me because it's getting a bit twitchy, and we will hopefully not have any more problems from that. So shh, don't say anything. It might go off. So we've got bulb, we've got live time. Now, if we go to live time, I'm going to go over there to live time just now. The difference between this, I do apologize for this. I'm actually just going to switch my feed out 1 second and see if that helps at all. There we go. So we're going to move over to live time. This camera is going to be the death of me this evening, I think. And what we're going to look at is, we're going to look at removing this cable is what we're going to look at. There we go. Let's completely take that cable out. I hope you can all hear me. I know we've got a blank screen. And this is one of the joys of doing live streams, which thankfully we've been doing now for about 4 years nearly. So we're kind of getting used to it. It's going to flicker again. I know it is. We might have a little bit of a problem with this. We'll do our best is what we'll do for the live stream. So we've moved from bulb to live time. We could use live bulb, but we still have to hold the shutter down as long as the exposure needs to happen. If we move to live time, we only need to press the shutter once. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. I am a lazy photographer, and I admit it all the time. I just want to press a button and let go of it. But if we're in bulb, we're holding that button down, and that's kind of a problem. So let's go back over, and hopefully this will behave itself. Live time lets me press the shutter release once to start this function. And then I'll press it again at the end to stop it. So here we go. We've pressed it once. I'm hands-free now. And I can watch this expose, which is great because it can get to the point where I want it. And then I can physically press that shutter button one more time to stop that from happening. Now, I'm not going to do that because I want to also explain that one of the things that you'll have to deal with either live bulb or live time now is that you only have a certain amount of refreshed views. So you will have seen in the top right hand corner when this started, it was counting up to 24. In this particular iteration of ISO setup, I get 24 refreshed live views before I don't see any more live refreshes, but you can see that counter in the top corner, which is telling me that that is still exposing. I'm going to stop it because I'm going to have to waffle for 45 seconds through that. So we're just going to press that now. You would have also seen that underneath there was a histogram, and that also stopped responding after those 24 refreshes. So we'll come back to a webcam view while that's happening. We definitely have got some gremlins in the works today. There are a few things going on. I can't blame the storm for that, I don't think, though. So we get our 24 refreshes. That's when we're using a set level of ISO. If we change the ISO, we'll get a different amount of refreshes, and I'm going to show you that in the menu in a moment. You need to take that into consideration over the length of your exposure as well. So, for example, if you're taking a 2-minute exposure, then 24 refreshes with a half a second gap between each one is not going to show you your exposure throughout the whole 2 minutes. It's not going to show you how that's developing. So we'll need to work on how that works. Let's go back over. The camera stopped now. So this was the final result of that. And that's much more overexposed than when we saw that final live view of what was going on. So let me dip now into the menu and tell you exactly how we can manipulate that one. So if I press the menu key on the OM1, or if you press it on an OMD, it'll always go directly to the specific bulb lifetime or live composite menu that you're dealing with. If you want to come out of that and go back properly into the menu, you have to press menu another 2 times. But I've pressed menu once, and it's brought me into the screen that dictates how long a gap there is between each refreshed live view I'm going to see. And by default, this is set to 0.5 seconds, so it's a very quick refresh. And there's a nice little chart underneath that tells you how many times you'll get a live refresh, depending on what ISO level you're using. So if we're on, I think we're on L80, low 80, but anywhere between low 80 and 200, you'll get 24 refreshes. If you step your ISO up to 400, you'll get 19 refreshes. Now, remember, if you're doing a 2-minute exposure and you want to see the adjustments all the way through that 2-minute exposure, you're going to need to work out how many refreshes fits into your 2 minutes. So let's say we have 24 refreshes and we're going to put that into 2 minutes. I usually break down those 2 minutes into seconds because we're working with seconds here for the gap between each one. So that's 120 seconds divided by the 24 that we've got refreshes, and that comes to 5. So ultimately what that means is that if I want to see a refresh throughout the whole exposure, I need to get as close to 5 seconds here in the settings as I can. Now, we can't choose 5 seconds, but we can choose 4 seconds. So I'm going to set 4 seconds and press OK. Don't worry about this menu. We're going to come back into this in a second and have a look at everything else. All right. Now, the 4 second here is exactly the same as bulb here if you switch this on. So if we go to 4 seconds in live bulb, it's going to do exactly the same thing as live time, but we'll have to hold that shutter down rather than just pressing the button once in live time and then pressing it at the end to stop. That's the only main difference there. So let's go back to our little artifact here, little hot sauce holder. It's quite cool. And we're going to set this running, and you can see there that the display count is on 0 for the first 4 seconds, and then it's 1, and then another 4 seconds, and 2. So we're getting those live refreshes now every 4 seconds. And with that, we are getting a responsive histogram as well. So that's coming in from the left there. It's showing us how that's starting to expose to the right, and it's pulling in those things. Now, the histogram in this instance is about as useful as a chocolate teapot because we have a large expanse of dark areas. So the histogram's not really giving us much information. But anyway, we're up to 9 refreshes now, and you can see now that that's massively overexposed. It's got to the point where it's no good to us. But we could have stopped it way earlier. Now, here we go with this fantastic noise reduction again. So this noise reduction is, once more, like bulb. It's taking a dark frame to the same value of shutter time that our actual image was, just to get rid of any heat noise. Okay. But we're going to turn that off in a second. We'll go back into that little menu and we'll turn it off. So effectively, what we're trying to demonstrate here is that you can use live time, but if you use it in the default of 0.5 seconds and your exposure is longer than seconds in total. After that 12 seconds, you won't see a live refresh and review. So you kind of need to work on rough, how long is my exposure going to be? 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes. And remember that live bulb and live time are a continuous exposure. It's just going to get brighter and brighter across the whole scene. Okay. Now, before we dip into that menu, crikey, we're already halfway through this session. How quickly has this gone? So I'm just going to go through, and I apologize if I miss any questions as well. I am on my own. Remember that. If you've got questions that you feel didn't get answered in the session, after the live finishes, you can come back to the video and add a regular comment as a question, and I'll jump in over the next day or so and answer those up. Because you have a fantastic username. Rather than infinity for fireworks, I try for the hyperfocal distance since I'm always including foreground elements. Perfect comment. Absolutely. So when we're shooting stars, that is infinity. That's in the cosmos, miles away, and we need to use an infinity process for that one. But when we're doing fireworks, they could be going off, 500 yards away, and you very much need to pick something within the kind of range of the fireworks. And as Superfly has quite accurately said, use your hyperfocal distance to make sure that things are sharp and your depth of field. Fantastic. Okay. So let's pick up on another question. I'm just picking up here from Mal. Yeah, don't worry. Oh, that's not that one. That's Elaine's. Don't worry. It will be available straight afterwards. If you missed the first 20 minutes, come back in. If you're only just joining, you can have a catch up later on when the live stream ends. Fantastic. Superfly, again, it sounds like you're really making the most of live composite. And this is what happens is we go out and do things. I sometimes go out, not undercover, so to speak, but I go out and people don't really know who I am and who I work for. And I take the cameras with me and we do kind of light painting things. And everybody that's using something else is kind of impressed by it. There are a couple of cameras now that are getting towards using the same thing. There is one that's very, very similar now. They've kind of caught up a little bit. But generally speaking, it's a bit of a wow factor thing as well. So, right. Let's go back into that menu. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that noise reduction. Now, you can keep the noise reduction in. If you're not a post editor and you don't want to be dealing with that in your post editing software, then you can leave it in. If you want it gone and you want to do all that yourself, then let's have a look at how we're going to do that. So we're in bulb, so we're going to press menu. That takes us to our functions menu, but we need to press it again. That takes us to the bulb time composite settings, and now one more time to bring us out into the menu proper. We're going to be going over to tab number 1, and then from tab number 1, we're going to go to page 3, and we're going to go down to noise reduction. Now, this noise reduction setting at the bottom of page 3 is purely based on those long exposures, and it's the dark frame noise reduction. So we are going to switch that off. And then that's now not going to do that really, really long-winded thing that it does at the end. We're going to take another shot just to show you the process. This is that 4-second display count refresh. So every 4 seconds, we see a better refreshed image. We'll see an update on the histogram, and we've got our counter. On this occasion, I'm going to leave it until it's just right, which is about there. And then I'm going to stop it. And so I've pressed the button to end that process, and now I'm not experiencing that noise reduction problem. But it's a problem for me because I don't want to wait around for 7 minutes if I've just taken a 7-minute exposure. Now, other brands of hot sauce are available. OM System do not collaborate or endorse Tabasco, but it is a firm favorite in our house. Now, what you can see here is that we've got really nice quality. That light has developed evenly. We've maintained some of that black background, but purely by chance because of where we stopped the exposure. If we let it run, then we're going to lose the highlights and all the shadows are going to pop out and show us some, rough around the edges, black backdrops that we don't really want to see. But we'll also need to look at this because what we'll see if we go in, we are shooting at a low ISO here, is that we can still see that there's a reasonably good noise ratio, so it's quite clean on that, but we did only leave it running for about 15 to 20 seconds. Any longer than that and we can expect to see some noise developing in the mid to dark tones, and that's something that you're going to want to handle either by leaving that noise reduction on or looking at it in post-production. Okay, so we'll carry on and look into the menu just in a second. I'm just going to pull up. Here we go. Ours asks, can you please explain why starry sky is required for stars? Surely infinity is infinity. Yep. You can use the infinity point on any lens and find that mostly it's not actually quite there. So you'll have to do a little bit of fiddling around with it. And so ultimately, starry sky is a quick AF way to focus on the stars. And it's accurate. So it's going to get those stars super sharp. And not everybody has 20/20 vision. Not everybody is good at really finding those super pinprick points on manual focus. And that's what starry sky is there for. Hope that helps. Okay, so let's go back and look in that menu now and have a little explore before we get into the live composite bit of this session. We're just over halfway through. So hitting menu, that's our lifetime refresh period. And hit it again. And then we're going to go into the bulb/time/composite settings. I'm going to go from the top just to give you an idea because we've already explored bulb and time, and then we're going to come on to the composite settings as well. So, and this is a computational feature. So if we go back one more time, you'll see in the menu, it's in tab 2 right at the bottom. If you're accessing it when you're not in bulb mode, but if you are accessing it when you are in bulb mode, it takes you straight there with 2 menu presses anyway. So bulb time focusing, this is actually really self-explanatory. It's on, it simply means can you refocus whilst exposing using bulb or lifetime. So whilst the frame is exposing, can you refocus artistically? Can you defocus and things like that if you're in manual focus? And yes, that one's on, so we can do that. You could just switch it off if you don't want that to happen. Now, bulb and time, or live bulb and live time, if you're using the live review, have a timer option. Default is set to 8 minutes, which means that if you set the function going and you use a lock off release, so you can press the release button and slide a switch to lock it, then the feature will automatically end at whatever time period we choose in here. And the longest one that you can choose for this one is 30 minutes. And the reason for that is because of a heat buildup. So any longer than 30 minutes and you're exposing your camera to a little bit more heat than you probably would like. And it's unlikely that you'll want a solid exposure of more than 30 minutes anyway. So that just simply means that if you've locked off your camera with a shutter release, it'll automatically end the exposure after that amount of time. The live composite time are very, very similar. So if we're running live composite, because we will be running this for longer because it is used for star trails and things like that, it means that you can set it running and you can go to bed. You can set this up to 6 hours on an OM1. And I believe, if I remember rightly, it was also up to 6 hours on an EM1 Mark III. And previous cameras was 3 hours. And what this means is it will simply end the exposure. On a full battery, it will run for 6 hours and end the exposure before it turns the camera off when the battery is depleted. You'll always get a save. Even if you haven't got a full battery, the camera will always detect that it's close to depletion and it will stop the exposure, save the image, and then shut down the camera for you. 6 hours is a nice amount of time for a star trail. A very, very long star trail. So then the next option is bulb time monitor. This relates to the back screen. So when you'll notice when you switch to bulb time or live composite that the rear screen dims, and it does that for 2 reasons. One, so it doesn't dazzle you because it thinks you're going to be working in a dark environment or at night. And 2, so you don't get any stray light that reflects off anything and might accidentally bounce onto things that are close to the lens. You can adjust that. If you are using bulb lifetime or live composite during the day, for example, if you're using it with ND filters, physical ones, not the algorithm ones in the camera because they can't be used together, then you can increase the brightness of your rear screen to the standard 0. Or if it's super bright outside, if you're lucky enough to have a large flaming ball of gas in the sky, then you can go even higher up to +7. We'll leave it at 0 just for now because it helps me here in the studio as well. So 4 minutes to 6 hours on an EM1. There we go. There we go. Look, Mel's answered that one. 4 minutes to 6 hours. I thought it did 6 hours on an EM1 Mark III. Thank you for the confirmation, Mel. Perfect stuff. I love I've got you guys to help me out. Okay, so the next option here Live bulb and live time, we've kind of covered that. That is the amount of time that will pass between live refreshes or live reviews in bulb and time. And the final one is the one that we're interested in now, and we're going to go ahead and start using live composite in a really silly way to give you an idea how that works. And that's the composite settings. And the easiest way to look at composite settings, the best way I want you to look at it, is that this is your shutter speed when you're using live composite. So when you use live composite, you can set your aperture value, you can set your ISO, but you can't set a shutter speed because that's where the word live composite is. But this effectively is your shutter speed. So a half a second is going to be the shutter speed of each exposure, which will then immediately run again, scanning that scene without any gap in the middle consistently. So there are no individual images. It's just rescanning every half a second exposure to find extra light in the image. Now, it's a bit complex here because of the way that this blurb is titled. It says exposure time and aperture will determine your base exposure. There is no base exposure. There's a complexity and a misunderstanding sometimes with this one. There is no real base exposure, not something that you can pull out and say that was the first image and everything is based on that. But exposure time and aperture determine how bright the stack will start at, and that how that whole frame ambiently will be maintained throughout the process of live composite. And hopefully that'll make sense when we see it. So we'll keep it at half a second. To give you an idea as well, half a second is great for light painting because you're in control of the light source. If you're doing fireworks, you might want to bring that up to a second, 1 second to maybe 3.2 seconds, but probably no more than that because of the brightness. I would also suggest that if you're doing lightning, you keep that down at about half a second to 1 second as well, because that's a very intense light. You don't want too much light flooding in beyond that. I always run mine at half a second. Now, if you're doing star trails, you'll need to be thinking about the formula that you need to use based on your focal length. Somebody in the chat is going to help me out because my brain is failing me at the moment. It's the 500 rule, I think, is what it is. Give me some confirmation in the comments here for you guys that use it all the time. So I think the 500 rule is the formula that you use to figure out how long your shutter speed needs to be to get a solid image of the stars before they start moving. And that principle can be used in live composite because each one is going to be run over into the next one anyway. So you don't want to overdo it. And generally speaking, you're probably going to be using a wide angle lens anyway. So you can get away probably with somewhere around the sort of 20-second mark. And that's kind of what I would use on a 12-40 f2.8 lens at 12mm. So 20 seconds will bring in enough light in a dark space. If you're in an area that's got light pollution, things like that, you may want to run that back a little bit, but you can always run a sort of 30-second tester because live composite shows you what's happening anyway. So if you run live composite for 30 seconds and think, wow, the sky is still, seriously dark, very, the stars are very pale, or on the flip side, wow, there's tons of noise pollution, I need to back off on that one. You can check it out in the first sort of 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to just leave that there. Come back to this camera here. Hi. And I'm going to bring in, because both Charles and Sarah, Sally, I can't bring up your comments at the same time, have asked about using live comp for the Aurora. I probably wouldn't use live comp for the Aurora. I would probably use live time because it will give you, because otherwise it'll become too smushy. The Aurora gives you very kind of soft waves, if you're lucky, that you'll be able to see using live time. And it's unlikely that you'll be running that shot for longer than about 45 seconds to a minute, really. And I would definitely use live time over live composite for the Aurora. And you can still see it happening as well. Grant's got a great comment saying you can ignore the 500 rule for live composite. You want star trails anyway. Yeah, you can. Effectively, yeah, you want star trails anyway. I would only use the 500 rule to set the live composite timing for quality purposes. So to not have, like, why would I have a 45-second live comp when it can do it in 20 and I can maintain that quality. That's the only reason. But Grant, you're right, absolutely. You want star trails anyway. You can ignore the 500 rule, but it gives you a good idea of where to maintain each one of those crossover shutter speeds for quality. Yeah, good. Yeah, there you go. Grant's got a good tip. 40 seconds or more. Yeah, no problem. You just then have to deal with the noise that creates. So if you want to avoid that, then you can stick to sort of 500 rule timings. Everybody shoots differently, and you know, there's no right or wrong way. Well, there probably is, but in this instance, yeah, you can do it both ways. Okay, so good. Let's see. David's asking, can this be used using a sky tracker like Move and Shoot? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not familiar with sky trackers myself and the sort of internal workings of how each one works, but you can use live time definitely with trackers. Live composite probably isn't the right one because you're looking for movement, and the tracker is obviously there to take that away. But you could use live time. Live time, and you could take many shots to then deep stack. I suppose that would be the best way to do it. Right, let's head back into that menu. So today we're not going to use extensive composite settings because we're in a light painting environment. A half a second works every time. 1/2 a second. So that's it. That's the menu for bulb time and comp. We're going to go back to a live view. Now, ultimately, what I want to see here is that when I take my initial shot and start the process, I don't want to see any of this light. Okay. Now, at the moment, you're seeing it because I've got a HDMI feed into that. So it's showing us a brightened view. But we're going to see the actual view in a second. Now, I can control this in a few ways. I've used ISO low 80 because I want to try and get rid of all the ambient light that's here. And I've used F8 because that will also help get rid of ambient light, but it also helps give me some depth of field because I'm shooting a product. I could probably get away with F6.3 for the depth of field, but F8 just closes down that aperture a bit more, restricts the light, and helps me to play around with it a bit. So one more click on that rear wheel takes me into live composite. And ultimately what we're seeing now is that this is flashing at -3 stops exposure. So the flashing means that the camera is telling me that this scene will be at least 3 stops underexposed. It could be a lot more, but it can't physically show me how much more. So it's at its limits of showing me the live view of how dark this is going to be. Trust me, it's going to be much, much darker than this. So whenever you see something flashing, it simply means that whatever that function is doing, it's at its limits of what it can do. Okay. So we're at F8. We've already set 1/2 a second in live composite, ISO L80, and 2 shots for this one. So the first shot is a preparation shot. This is the one that people think is the base exposure. It's actually an initial dark frame to kind of deal with any noise. Now, I know we turned off noise reduction in long exposures because it was annoying to have to wait 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes on top of a 5-minute exposure. But in live composite, it's much shorter because we're using a 1/2 a second live composite shutter speed. The noise reduction will only be a 1/2 a second, and it's 1 at the start and 1 at the end. You can autofocus. This is a great question, actually. Going awesome places. I hope you are. You can autofocus on the second shot. So this first shot is for noise reduction. It's just a dark frame. And that's why this shot isn't a base exposure, because it's not focusing on anything. So this first shot is going to take a dark frame, very quick, 1/2 second. The next shot, you can manually focus, or as I'm going to do, just autofocus. Okay. So I'm going to autofocus and start. Now I don't need to hold my finger down. It's just going to run it. And as I hoped, I've eliminated pretty much all of the ambient light. There's a little bit hanging around in there, but that's not a problem. Now, as you can see in the top right-hand corner, we've got 1/2 a second times load of numbers. That's telling me how many 1/2 second exposures the camera has scanned through, looking for extra light from which is there more than when we started. On the left-hand side, we've got a total counter and we've got a live histogram as well. Nothing's going to happen here until the light changes. So I'm going to stand up now. So my voice might change depending on where I am in relation to the microphone. I might just move the microphone a little bit and hopefully you can all still hear me. I'm going to use a couple of different tools just to add in some gentle light. And we'll show you the difference here I'm just using a diffuse torch now, and I'm just going to gently get closer and closer to this with my diffuse torch, and you'll see how this starts to develop as I apply light in very specific areas of the product. So as we get a bit closer, we can pull out different areas like this, and I can move my light around, and I can apply that light wherever I want it, really. And that's quite useful, as long as you don't cross over your own lens, which I do all the time. And we can just keep applying that, adding it in. So the trick with this is that you use a set light source. I use a low level light source, and I get closer and closer and closer to add that light in, because the distance is what brings the light stronger. If I get as close as I possibly can without crossing into the lens's view, then I need to turn my light source up, and I generally do that as well. So, and as you can see, I just stopped applying light and just carried on talking. It's taken now over 220 half-a-second exposures. Ignore the histogram because we've got tons of dark going on in there anyway, so it's not useful to us at all. I'm just going to try and apply a little bit of light to the left-hand side of this product and to the back, and just bring that in a little bit brighter. There we go. It's not the best in terms of product because we've got a little bit of shining in there, but this is just to demonstrate and give you an idea. What I'm also demonstrating now is that I've just crossed into my lenses field of view right at the top there with that diffuse torch. So we're going to pretend that didn't happen. I mean, the best thing about this is we could actually just say I've mucked it up, and I can see that, and this is the benefit of live composite. So we're going to stop that. You'll see that very quick half-a-second noise exposure, noise reduction that happened at the start. We don't have to wait around. It's very quick. We can't turn that off. That is part of the feature. So I know I messed it up. I'm just going to go straight in and do it again. But on this occasion, I'm going to do it real quick. Okay. So and try and stay out of my own field of view and just bring this in. Nice. Oh, there we go. Popped it in again. I'm going to leave that in the corner because we don't want to start another one. And just bring that up, brighten it up. There we go. So I also realize as well, it looks great on my screen right now, but in the stream, it's a lot darker. So there is that challenge to the live view as well. Okay, so if I get that to the level that I want it to be at, let's say that's it, then I'm just going to have a little sit down, actually. And let's move this camera over. It's still running. I'm just going to leave it there, and we'll come back to it in a second. And I'm doing that to prove a point. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Vincent, never apologize for questions. Whether you're a noob or whether you're experienced, there's always a question to be had. When I switched my EM1.3 in 1 Mark III to be or lifetime, there was a green boost label displayed. What does it signify? So the boost means that you're seeing a brightened view, not the final exposure. And it has to do that in lifetime and live bulb because it doesn't know how long you're going to run that exposure for. So it boosts the view so that you can compose the scene. It's a nice question. Going awesome places. We've fixed the question. You didn't understand why you couldn't focus on the initial shot, but you can autofocus when ready to shoot. Yeah, and it's that complexity of people misunderstanding that initial shot isn't actually a shot. It's just a dark frame. It's not a base exposure. Good. Okay, great. Couple of questions. Okay, let's go back over there. See what it's doing. It's doing nothing because we've not applied any more light on there. So let's go back over. There it is. It's still nearly 2 minutes in. My little faux pas at the top there, where I got my light source in, and it's run over 230 half-a-second scans. Okay, let's put some fun into it. So, and obviously this is light painting. This isn't star trails, and this is not car trails. These are not, I fully understand that you're going to be using this in an environment where you might not be completely in control of what's happening, which is why practice, practice, practice. Now, in this instance, we are in control. I'm just going to try and add something really delicate and gentle in here with some optic fiber lights and try not to destroy things in my way while I'm doing it. There we go. And then we'll try and do that. And a little bit here as well. And there we go. So that's just a little bit of playing around with some optic fiber lights just to give a bit of depth to the background. And if you really wanted to, you could also put in just some little sort of sausages of whirls and things like that. Let's just do this. I think with the light that I have here, maybe a touch too, what's the word, dim. Oh, there we go. There we go. Get some more coming on here as well. Let's just try that one there. There we go. A few bits like that. So you can play around and have loads of fun with that. Excuse the microphone noise just as I move it back over. So let's take a look at this as we're running into the last sort of 10 minutes of this session. I'm going to come back and answer some more questions. Ultimately, yes, we can do a lot better if we take our time, but hopefully that demonstrates what Live Composite can do and how it can add things in, both in a light painting environment and obviously in a more natural landscape environment as well. I'm going to stop that process at 450 shots, 3 minutes, 45 seconds, quick half a second noise reduction in the background. And for a 3-minute shot, because we were at a low ISO, we won't get any noise in those midtones and darker areas. There's some slight movement because I think I knocked the camera on the way, but we get really nice clean colors and shadows, which is something that we'll struggle with a true long exposure. And remember that this is raw as well. If you set raw in the camera, then you'll get this out as a raw, as a single image. Now I just want to demonstrate real quickly how the ambient light can change things considerably. So if I was to now run my aperture down to f4, and then we will take that shot again. So at f4, we're seeing already more light in the initial stages of this exposure. But if I go back in and bring that optic fiber light in that I was just using, we're going to see this. It's going to be much, much brighter because that aperture is having such a huge amount of control over the way that the light works. And we've managed to maintain most of the darkness that we wanted to, but now we can lose control over that external bits of light here as well. So the aperture, ISO, and that Live Composite shutter speed setting are all very important to get correct. And the formula will change for each one that you, for each situation that you work in and each environment. Good. So, wow. I haven't run around on a live stream like this since I think last Christmas when we did something similar with Live Composite. But it's fun and hopefully it makes a lot of sense. Let's see, let's pull in some questions. I'm not even reading these before I put them up. That's playing a dangerous game, I think, on YouTube. So, Nick, are you saying that during live comp, you don't have to set manual focus before starting live comp? I was surprised to see you start with SAF. No, that's right. You can use manual focus. You can use autofocus. But it would always, autofocus would always be on that second press of the button because the first one isn't a focusing option. So yeah, you can. Best settings for lightning, a stop underexposed in live time would be great because you can see what's happening. You'll see each sort of bolt of lightning appear, but start your exposure as stop under with all your ambient surroundings because that lightning is going to brighten the scene up. Focus on something very far, close to infinity. Or if you know that the lightning is occurring in a specific area of the landscape, focus on that area of the landscape. Good. Let's have a look. GD said, should you have used 4 seconds to shorten the time for Live Composite? If I use 4 seconds, then I'm absorbing more ambient light within that 4 seconds. And so you would have seen the whole background, which is something that you don't want to show in an image of this nature. So 4 seconds pulls in more ambient light. And it varies. There may be some situations out in nature where you would want to use 4 seconds, but in this instance, it's a half second that works for this type of photography. Denise wants to know, can you show the tools you use for light painting? I can indeed, actually, yes. So, and again, OM System aren't affiliated really with this brand, but they are an excellent brand. I really like them. I've been using them for years. It's a brand called Light Painting Brushes. And their little badge there is LPB, Light Painting Brushes. You can find them on Instagram. You can see there's a guy called Jason Page who set it up. He is a light painter. Really, really nice tools. Based in America, but there is a UK distributor now. I guarantee someone is in the chat that can put up the UK distributor and US links because they use them, because these are really, really popular. They do the optic fibers, but you can get them from loads of different places. They do things like perspex shape tools that you can kind of use to make shapes and things like that. But you can explore all that if you're interested. It's lightpaintingbrushes.com. And let's just put this one up as well. Jill is asking, is it better to use live time or live composite for lightning? My preference would probably be live time. I think it depends on the duration of the line. If you're going to leave it running for a few hours to capture lightning, then live composite is the only way, because it has to be live composite to go over 30 minutes. So yeah, it depends on the duration of it. Both would work equally well, to be honest with you, but you have to be a bit more finicky with your live composite settings. Let's see, Ed. Sorry you missed some of the class. Don't worry. When you say start at a stop under, how do you determine where to start? So, for example, let's go. Yeah, we got time. They'll kick me off if they want rid of me, right? Let's go over to the camera. Let's go to live time, because that's what I would start a stop under for. So as you can see here, it's quite bright. Ultimately, you're not going to be able to see where your stop under is from here. So the best way to look at that is to go into, say, aperture priority. There you go. And then bring yourself a stop under here. And then as I'm now a stop under at my required aperture and my required ISO, you can tell that the camera is telling me what shutter speed I would need to use in order to be a stop under. And that is 8 seconds in this particular scenario. That's if you're using that to input into live composite for lightning and fireworks as well. Good question. Don't ever worry about missing stuff, because you can always catch up with this stuff as well. So that kind of rolls us over to, I'm just have a quick scan in case I've missed any really key questions. Oh, this looks like a good one. Again, I'll just bring it in. Brian said, Brian used it recently to great effect for an evening aircraft display where the aircraft was carrying pyrotechnics. Set it at ½ a second and ran for 3.5 minutes. Brilliant. Brian, that's perfect. And that sounds incredible. And also, don't forget, if you're using live composite and you're getting these incredible images, then get over to your My OM System account, upload them into the community, share them with us. We love to see them. Brian, I would love to see that one. So if you can share it with us on socials, tag us, do that as well. Really important thing is to just find us all over socials as well. So if you use Instagram, Facebook, things like that. We're even about on that Toptic now, I think. Don't know. Some very clever people are running that. Okay, so I'm just going to hit Sarah's question, and then we're going to call today's session to a halt. Sarah's asked, how do you focus to infinity? So ultimately, focusing to infinity means reaching the very stretches of where your lens will focus. Generally speaking, you need something to focus on to do that. The stars are at infinity, so starry sky is a great way to focus at infinity. But you can find on your lens there will be an infinity symbol, which is that kind of like figure of 8 on its side. And you can kind of get close to that. But most lenses, the figure of 8 infinity symbol is never exactly where infinity is. So you might want to be a little smidge before or after. And sometimes if you're using the same lens, what a lot of people will do is put a bit of tape right there on that part of the lens to show that's where my infinity point is. Okie dokie. So thank you very much, everybody. There are some more questions. I really, really want you to take those questions and drop them into the regular comments once the live finishes, and then I can pick up on them in writing and give you a bit of a better answer. But thank you so much for coming in on this Tech Thursday. It's been a couple of months because I've been so super busy with different things. But this Tech Thursday, and we've got another one next month, which will be looking at autumn macro. So another one of my favorite topics as well. And we'll just, be bringing in the dead flora, the crusty leaves and things like that, and using the 60 and the 90 and maybe even the 30 mil as well. So thanks very much for coming in. Thank you for all of your contributions in the comments. Thanks for being nice to me and everyone else. So for now, I'm going to say toodaloo, and I will see you on the next one.